Here is my brand new Reeb Cycles Sqweeb, but you probably recognize it more in this picture. All Reeb cycles are made 100% in Longmont, Colorado, so when I had the opportunity to travel out there and watch my personal bike get built, you know I had to jump at the chance. I know you've probably seen lots of bike check videos before, but this one might be the most thorough since it starts with the raw materials. Here's my chainstay pivots being machined, and then here's a time lapse of the rocker arms being made. This is what they look like when they're halfway done. Once all the parts for the rear end are done, they're bolted into a fixture for welding. This ensures that everything is aligned properly and keeps your suspension running smooth. The fixture is small and lightweight so you can move it around and allows you to get welds on all the different parts of the swing arm. The next step is mitering the top and down tubes of the bike. Each frame size is different, so proper measurements and cuts are critical. Once that's done, the holes for the water bottle mounts and the cable holders are drilled. This is definitely my frame, and this is the slot being machined in at the top of the seat tube. This next step is critical. The bottom bracket cluster gets bolted into the fixture, and then the seat tube gets clamped in and the main pivot hole gets drilled. Once that's all done, it's time to weld the seat tube to the bottom bracket and the main pivot to the seat tube. Cable guides get welded on while the frame is still apart for easier access. This part is super cool. The bottom bracket and the head tube get clamped into the frame jig, and the down tube is welded into place. There's a 360-degree bead where the tube slips over the shell. Next, the top tube gets put into place, and everything is tacked before the frame gets welded. There's a lot of areas to cover, so it takes quite a while to go around the entire thing. A few more welds and then it's sent off to the powder coater. I chose red, and I'll explain why I did in my bike check coming up. But like one giant big puzzle, these bikes are assembled completely by hand in Colorado. Decals are the last thing to go on. I watched my frame get built, but I didn't see it get painted, so I was sitting at home eagerly waiting as this thing got carefully packed up and sent out to me in New Jersey. I could honestly say that I haven't been this excited to get a new bike in a really long time. So like a kid on Christmas, I ripped off all the packaging to check it out. It looked way better in person than I could have even imagined. When you're building a bike from scratch, the best place to start is usually by putting in the fork and the handlebars. That'll give you a place to hang most of the components as you go through the build. I'll usually start with a cockpit, brakes, shifters, any other levers on the handlebar, stuff like that, and I'll put on the grips just so that I can gauge where everything needs to be clamped down. Once the brakes were hung, then I put in the rear shock. This just keeps the bike all together once I start assembling more stuff. The next step was putting on the rear derailleur, and since this is an electronic model, you run a wire instead of a cable. I threw some extra heat shrink on there just to make it a little bit more durable at all the connection points. This bike uses externally routed cables. Internally routed cables are super popular nowadays, but it's a total pain in the butt when you're building a bike. So I was a little skeptical on how it would look, so I took a little extra time and put some heat shrink on there to make everything neat and tidy. And once the bike was all together, it looked super dialed and the bike went together way quicker. If you want to do any kind of serious trail riding, tubeless tires are mandatory, and having good sealant like Orange Seal is essential. The saddle is usually the last thing I bolt on the bike, and then with the wheels and everything attached, I put it on the ground, adjust my cockpit, get everything where I want it, and then make all the final adjustments. This is my first bike check on my 2019 Reeb Sqweeb version 2.0. As you can see, there's a little bit of dirt on this bike. I am absolutely amazed at how well this thing rides. All right, so let's jump into it. First off, the frame is an extra large Reeb Sqweeb. This is version 2.0, so basically we rearranged the rocker arm, made the shock a little bit more progressive just at the end of the travel, and made it a little bit more supple at the beginning. So when you ride this thing, it soaks up all the small shocks. Even with an air shock, it's super compliant and supple, and it has awesome bottom out resistance. Other than that, we made a monocoque bottom bracket junction. So basically we took two halves and put them together. It allowed us to shave a bunch of weight in the bottom bracket area and just make that whole area nice and clean. I decided to use this metallic candy apple red frame because I wanted it to match the bikes that we give away for the Candide Foundation. So the kids are going to be getting red bikes with white graphics. If they see my personal bike, it's going to be a red bike with white graphics as well. I thought that was a really cool tie-in. Moving on from this frame, we'll go into suspension. So I'm using a DVO Diamond fork up front. I have it set at 160 millimeters. My rear suspension is a DVO Topaz 3 air shock. It's nice and light, super adjustable. Moving on to the cockpit, I'm using Ergon GE1 grips. I like the ergonomics of these grips. And then I'm running Shimano Di2 Shifting again. I've been using this for a few years. When I first got it, I thought it was going to be super complicated, and now after 2 years of using it and not having any problems, I really like the ergonomics of the shifter. I like that I don't have to adjust my bike ever. It's always going to be perfectly tuned for shifting. And then if you're climbing a hill and you just want to hold it, you can just keep dumping gears into easier shifts. So I think it's pretty cool. It works for me. And then for my brakes, I'm using Shimano Deore XT brakes. And on this bike, I only have the 2-piston. I'll eventually switch those over to 4, but I wanted to get this bike built up in a rush and I didn't have them just yet. Handlebars, I'm using Pro Tharsis carbon handlebars, and then these are set up specifically for the Di2, so it allows you to run your cables inside the handlebar and through the stem, and it keeps everything nice and clean looking. And then for the stem, I'm running a Tharsis Pro stem, and it's 45 millimeters long. This bike is actually about over a ½ inch longer than what I've ridden in the past, so I kept the same size stem, but the extra length in the cockpit really makes it feel nice and stable on descents and gives me a little bit more room to move around. On the left side, I have a PNW dropper lever, and then that's connected to a 170 Bachelor post. So it's the Loam lever and the Bachelor post. It's really smooth actuation, and I've never had a 170 dropper post before. This is the first bike I've gotten that on, and having the 170 millimeters of travel is really awesome. I have a 36-inch inseam, so I think the longer your inseam is, the more travel you need in your seat post, and 170 feels really awesome. The brain center of this bike is a Wahoo Element Bolt computer. I love this computer. It's super intuitive. When you first get it, you turn it on, you take a picture of it with your phone, and it syncs it up super seamlessly. Moving on to wheels, this is something new for me this year. I'm running Industry 9. These are 100% made in America wheels as well. They're super cool, they're super light. I have the red stripe with the spokes in there, and then mounted up to those are Vittoria Martello tires. One of the most important things, you don't want to be getting flats when you go out trail riding, so I'm running orange seal sealant front and back. It allows me to go out on the trails and just have that peace of mind that I'm not being getting flats, and if I do, they'll fill themselves. So I have 170 cranks in the front with trail pedals, and then I'm running a 32 tooth chainring in the front, and then I have an 1142 in the back. We'll probably end up going to a 46 tooth chainring. The rear derailleur is a Shimano Diore XT Di2 as well. It's really cool, shifts fast like I said, and it's been super reliable. I'm running a Shimano carbon water bottle cage, and then in the water bottle cage I have a Cliff Bar water bottle. Cliff Bar is now my longest standing sponsor at over 17 years. These guys have supported me a really long time. So you gotta rep the red water bottle, and when it matches your bike, it's just extra bonus points. For saddle duties, I'm running an Ergon SME3 saddle. This is a medium version. My sit bones actually dictate that I would want a large saddle, but the medium is actually very comfortable, and I like it that's a little bit slimmer for when you're riding technical terrain and everything. It just allows it to move between your legs a little bit more and not get hung up on your shorts and stuff like that. So that's a quick overview of my bike. As you can see, there's some dirt on here. I've been riding this thing. I am absolutely in love with it. So stay tuned for some riding videos next, because I can tell you this thing absolutely shreds, and I'm super impressed and can't wait to share some riding with all of you. Thanks for checking out my bike check. Make sure you're subscribed, and if you aren't, hit that button now so that you can follow up on all my future adventures. Until next time, I hope to see you on the trail.